Recording. Oh, you can't get out of it. It's a 360. There's no escape. I am going to shrink it though. Yeah, just go ahead and start it. All my high plus classes record anyway, so I've gotten very used to the flattering angles. But nobody's live streaming, like nobody's joining us. It's just we're recording for the right, etc. Oh, I need to pull it back up and shit. So folks at home will be able to see. We're about to become a tiny box. I think. Yeah, it'll just be a PowerPoint on their end, I think. I heard you hype manning me.
I was. I said, if you want to learn how to kill somebody,
This go fly in your eye.
that's what I said. That's why I thought I looked to make sure no one was
They're waiting on where they want to go. There's so many good options. Like if I didn't have this session, I would be going to the AI, your incorporating AI in your instruction that Dr. Rivers. I would have loved that.
Yeah, I tried to hype it.
Say we might be all alone in here. I'll just do a mini lecture.
How to crime, how to kill something.
Right. Right. No, they'll come if they want to. Hey, Laura. When are you? No, it's fine. They'll come if they want to. So how far along are you in your program? How far along are you?
Graduate with my undergrad spring 25.
Oh yeah?
And then summer 25, I'll start my master's.
Ooh, where are you gonna get your master's at?
Here.
Oh, what are you mastering in? Is it
HR.
business or HR? Yeah. Oh, cool. Do you need my bio to introduce me?
Your bio is
It's on the slide.
Oh, is it really? That's all your bio is. Why didn't you say nothing else?
She said, well, that's what I am. I haven't published books.
Oh, you haven't?
I published scholarly things. I haven't published books. I'm not that cool. I'm not Bradley Sides.
Well, no, I didn't need your bio. I knew that. I knew you were assistant professor, so I was like, even without reading that, I knew your bio.
Let's see. Tell her she's got to come pick me up after this.
Yeah, no,
to the next day. I can't pick up the 10 pounds is why. So she's my pack mule. I love pack mule.
I will start I'm not waiting. A lot of people say you should wait.
Hey, welcome.
Yeah, you're here to learn how to hide the body. You're here to learn how to hide the body.
I'll go talk about that. All right.
I like the logistics part. I want to know all the logistics of it.
Oh, the logistics of plotting a crime? Yeah. Hello. So you get all the murderous people coming in here. Yes, yes. It's hard to pick. It's for me. There's like if I wasn't going, there'd be 3 different ones I'd want to go to right now. I'd probably go to the AI one.
This is the best session, right? Right here, there are 3 that I wanted to.
Oh, the time spot.
Yeah, this time spot.
Yes.
So you won out of 3.
I feel so honored.
Excellent. So.
I feel so
honored.
I hope I live up to the hype.
I was hyping her in the hallway. So at the end of last year and spring, the semester, we had our ambassador party and we voted on who was like little awards and stuff. And I got voted, of course. And they were like, this award could go to nobody else but you. And I got life of a party.
Oh, I see it.
Like, you are so crazy.
You know, I can see it.
4 minutes.
Yeah, 4 minutes, and then we just have to check the hall because sometimes folks are coming from like the library to hear. That's what someone told me this morning. They were like, I had to run from the
Well,
library.
essentially, I went in the hallway too, just to make sure nobody wasn't like looking around, but they were all just standing.
Yeah, there's a lot. I think there's a lot on this hallway going on. Do you guys crime fiction writers, or are you just interested?
Yes. But I'm not a publisher. I'm not a published writer, but my mom is, and I edit her stuff. And
Yeah.
so I'm looking, and she's got a surreal crime story this time. Like
Ooh.
before, it's been sort of borderline, but this one is a flat out crime story. So
Like blood and glory and everything.
no, not like blood and gore. She's
It doesn't have to always be blood and gore.
it's mystery. It's gotta know who done it.
Agatha Christie.
I don't know who done it yet. Yeah.
What do you do at Calhoun?
I'm the Dean of Humanities and Social Sciences. And an English teacher when I teach.
A reflection paper, it's more personal, isn't it?
A reflection paper.
Reflection paper, not you.
Yeah. Are you writing one right now?
That's what I was telling you for this semester, but it's throwing me off because we have to use references in it. And so
They're supporting your reflections.
that's the part that I'm confused. How do you support my own opinion
You know who to reach out to.
in my professor?
Exactly. You got to ask them because what their expectations would be different from whatever mine are for a particular class too, right? A reflection in one class might look really different than another class. I have not published any crime fiction or any fiction yet. I've only published academic works. I'm an assistant professor here. Yeah, but I'm teaching crime fiction at Athens State this summer, and I think that's why the Writing Center was like, hey, you know.
Yeah.
So some of this is just pulled from my crime fiction class, and some of them might show up if I told them, yeah, you can get extra credit if you come to the Writers' Summit. I didn't say they had to come to this. Because they're doing crime fiction, and then for their final project, they have to create crime fiction, and it can be any kind, because it's not always just books. So I have a student, for example, who's doing a Dungeons and Dragons crime fiction campaign. Somebody's doing a radio drama. Someone's doing a very academic poster presentation, because that, she's comfortable there, but that's cool, It's always exciting to see, like, what are they going to do? And if it's not a paper, I get so tired of reading papers.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm tired of writing papers. If you're in the College of Business, that's all you do is write papers.
And now it's also is it ChatGPT or is it them or like, did they cross a line? That's become a whole thing.
I love ChatGPT, but if you're not a very ethical person, I can see where you can cross that line. Because it's very easy as a student to cross that line. You have to be very careful if you're using it.
Yeah. I tell students they can use it as an editor to generate ideas.
That's what I use it for.
Review, like do grammar checks, but you can't just take it. It's not a very good writer, first of all.
You have to be very careful.
But also, sometimes students are just really good. Hello. They use it as sort of, I got to get something turned in, and I've got 2 jobs and 2 kids.
I use it if I get stuck.
I'm doing my best here.
I use it if I get stuck, like to help me rethink my thoughts.
Yeah.
I think ChatGPT.
Well, I wish, like, Dr. Roper's doing the AI in your curriculum thing right now.
There's another one going on at the library.
I know, there were so many of them. Well, it is 4:30 if we want to get started. And if people trickle in, that's cool. I'm honored I got anybody, because like I said, there are some really cool choices. I was prepared to just record a mini lecture for this. It is recording, but there's nobody live streaming, and it really is just so they can post for later.
Nobody's in the hallway but Abigail.
All right, I'm going to do the hype man speech.
Yes. So you guys are such a treat. You are about to hear from one of our assistant professors of English, Dr. Patricia Elmore. She's going to teach you how to plot a crime.
Well, there should be some hype music too. All right. So let's just start with crime fiction. What comes to mind? So it's usually cliches, right? So what comes to your head when you hear crime fiction? Like, what are you
Wow.
imagining? What are you imagining?
Hops. What?
She just holds up her crime fiction books. The ones you're reading for class right now, yeah.
Sometimes I even think back to like middle school, Nancy Drew.
Nancy Drew.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So, what's my very first non-picture book?
Yeah. And what are like some of the accoutrements or like symbols or items that you think of? Crime fiction.
Body shapes.
Body shape, like the chalk line.
Chalk
Yeah.
line on the floor. That's exactly.
Yeah.
Glasses,
Shade.
Pair of glasses.
magnifying
Oh,
glass.
magnify. Oh, we're getting real traditional now, like Sherlock Holmes, like the hat and the cloak.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's a whole thing, right? And we'll get to that actually. So I'm glad you brought that up. But currently in modern hard-boiled fiction, detectives tend to be depicted as like lazy, jaded, overweight. And I think it's a reaction to that slim, willowy Sherlock Holmes character that kind of came out in the 1920s through 50s is when it happened. But you still see it lingering on, and people are kind of tired of it, you know. So just going back to publication advice, so the person who's here last was talking about how to publish short stories. You know, you don't want to do what everybody's doing. But for you, the writer, I do have some questions before we get started. So who is your investigator? Who are they? If you were writing a story right now, what kind of investigator would you want? Like, what would they look like? What would their career be? Often you do see cops because it kind of makes sense, but it's so done, isn't it? Isn't it so done?
Yeah,
So can you think of something unique to be an investigator? Like in crime fiction, there's going to be a cat who's the detective in one of the books I read. It's cozy detective fiction, right? It doesn't always have to be a cop.
Writers, Jessica Fletcher, Murder, She Wrote.
Right. I'm glad you brought her up because she's on one of the next slides.
Don't ask her to your town.
Yeah. Amateur sleuths, or especially in young adult fiction, you see the amateur sleuth. You might have like the Scooby-Doo gang, you know.
Librarians are a lot right now too. I see a
Yeah.
lot of stories with librarians as investigators.
Yeah. Which kind of makes sense because again, it's that access to knowledge, and it kind of helps the writer out because I ain't got to go get educated. You know, the character would just already know. Is your story, is it going to have a theme or a message? Are you trying to say something, right, with your story? Are there discourses running through it? Are you using a certain structure or storycraft method, or are you just kind of throwing it at the wall and seeing what sticks? Which for some kinds of fiction that works. Crime fiction usually requires planning. You kind of know where it's going, right? You need to know where we're trying to get to so that you can subvert expectations and have those red herrings and those clues sprinkled along. What is the big conflict? So you've seen a plot chart, right? We all went to school where it's like we're going to the climax and then we have the falling action and the resolution. Well, what is your big moment? Like, what is the either you're going to win or lose moment? You should know that before you start writing. That should be one of the first things you decide on. Like, what are we building towards the entire time? Are you using or subverting any cliches? Are you going to have an overweight cop who's jaded and he's like, you know, he's got ideation and his family was murdered and it's just very done? Are you going to do that? And if so, it's okay to do it, but how are you going to make it interesting? And then also, what makes your villain compelling? Because if your villain's an idiot or if they're not compelling, nobody's going to want to read, right? Think back to Disney movies, especially classic Disney. The villain's the most interesting part, right? Like Jafar and Aladdin, Scar and Lion King, Ursula, Cruella, right? I mean, what makes them tick? You know, that's what makes it so interesting. And speaking of crime fiction, 101 Dalmatians is crime fiction, right? So don't think we're leaving out children's fiction if you're interested in that. When we're thinking about it. That one wants to steal puppies and turn them into coats. That is some sick stuff. Fits right in with crime fiction. But now just to go through them individually, you have to start with characters. So who is your investigator, right? We've got the very traditional long trench coat, you know, Sherlock Holmes character. But maybe you're thinking about doing, did you say her name was Jessica Fletcher, right? All I think is Murder, She Wrote, which I've never seen the show, but I know she solved mysteries and I know it was crime drama. And I put her on here because if I start with her as my character, there are already certain things that fall into place. She's not getting in fist fights. right? That already creates a certain kind of dramas. How is this lady gonna survive? Because I'm not trying to be ageist, but there are certain things she's not gonna be able to do. She's not gonna be jumping across the top of a train. She's not gonna be getting in a fist fight with anybody. She's gonna have to depend on other strengths, right? And there's just also something about her look and her dress, how does she weld that as a character? Um, and then you also have characters like this guy right here. This is from Criminal Minds, Derek Morgan. He can jump across trains. You're going to be able to do an action crime fiction with him very easily if you want to. And him and his background and everything about him is going to impact the way that character reacts and also the kind of villain that character is going to run into. He's in the FBI. What kind of villains as a reader am I expecting? Right? I'm not expecting Cruella de Vil.
Right.
I'm expecting, crime bosses and serial killers and things like that if I see him as my protagonist. Or here if we have Charlie Epps from Numbers, one of my personal favorite shows. I'm marathoning it right now. He's a math professor. I'm not a math professor. I'm an English professor. But again, not going to get in a fist fight with anybody, but he has this special thing about him. He's a savant at math. So that's also a crime fiction cliche, but you can use it very effectively to have the character just be really good at something. And they use that as part of the plot. So he helps the FBI solve crimes, and it makes sense because he's just naturally extremely good at math, but he's also socially awkward. I mean, there are lots of flaws in inevitable there too, because, I don't know what professors, we're just considered a certain way. We're considered weird. We're kind of dorks, It's true. It's true. Would you say it's true?
Certain professors. I mean,
She flashed her eyebrows at me. And then we have this detective here, which is from the Stephen King book, Mr. Mercedes, which has been turned into live action. He is, in the book, described as overweight, as having an issue with alcoholism. This is a more popular, and I say popular, but I guess I should say more commonly used trope. It's become a trope at this point, that he's very jaded, and he kind of something has to push him to get back into it, get back into the game. That story is very worn and thin, and I would dissuade you from it, right? Crime fiction often are thrillers, like books you want to read on an airplane. You kind of want to get into the action fast. So action, blending action with crime, that's a good way to go right now in the modern era. But there is still an audience for these locked room mysteries. I got to figure out who done it. And sometimes even these action thrillers can be locked room. Because I have to rescue the hostages before they're all killed, or I have to find the big bomb before it goes off. That is a locked room too. So the very first thing you should do is decide who's your investigator and go ahead and kind of flesh that person out in your head. Get it to the point where you could imagine them sitting there and you could have a conversation with them. You'd know who they'd vote for. You'd know their favorite food. You just know some general things about them that kind of define them as a person, right? And what makes them interesting? What makes them an interesting protagonist to follow? Especially since if you're writing fiction, you can't see them. So like here, Derek, he's hot. Charlie is hot. Like I'm attracted to these people. That's part of what makes them interesting to follow for me, but also just the fact that, oh, I'm a professor, I relate. Or, hey, the FBI is cool, right? Kicking down doors. Is that cool? I don't know. That leads into, what are you trying to say? Are there any discourses running through your novel? So remember, fiction is a safe place to talk about real world issues. Things like life and death come up in crime fiction a lot, because there's usually a lot of death, right? The serial killer, the killer, you have to prove that they are a threat. So often crime fiction authors will have them do something terrible near the beginning of the book. Speaking of Mr. Mercedes, it starts with all these people waiting in line for jobs. Because there's been a job shortage in the economy, and there's this man and a woman and a baby. He uses his Mercedes and he mows those people down, right? Completely innocent. And it's to immediately show you, the reader, this dude means business. If he says he's going to kill the dog, he's going to kill the dog, right? If he says he's going to kill the detective, I believe him, because look what he just did to a baby, right? Often themes of justice and injustice, systemic corruption, police corruption, these kinds of things you'll often see in crime fiction. And then the tension between haves and have-nots, because there's usually something that makes the villain tick, right? It's usually some kind of, I've been stepped on in some way, something's happened to me. Or sometimes we can all quote The Dark Knight. Some people just like to see the world Explode, burn is the actual quote. It's okay. I'm a big old DC nerd. It's okay. I forget. Um, but yeah, some people really are just psychopathic. Like they enjoy suffering. If you're going to write about mental illness and use that in your crime fiction novel, though, I do advise you educate yourself about it so that you don't misrepresent populations. And I think that's true with any population that you choose to use in your novel or short story. So 3, what structure will you use? A very popular one is the 3-act structure. And it's like beginning, middle, end, right? It's actually closer to that plot chart that I was just mentioning. You know, raise your hand if you ever had to do a plot chart in middle school, right? I used to be a middle school teacher and they hated them so much. But it's true. You have a beginning, something kicks off the drama, right? And it might be taking place elsewhere, and then your detective or your hero comes in and is brought into it. They're invited to it. We call it the call to adventure in fantasy fiction. Right there. They're on Strangers in the Train, which Victoria's holding up. It's literally he's on a train and a guy who has issues says, I want to kill my dad, but I can't. And you want to kill your wife. I can tell you don't like her. How about we kill each other's people and nobody will know? And there's a call to adventure. He could say, yeah. Of course, he says no. But what goes wrong, Victoria?
Because crazy guy ends up killing his wife.
He actually does kill the ex-wife. And Ed's like, now you got to kill my dad that I don't like.
Dad, basically.
Yeah, and so now you're in a trap, right? You're implicated. You had knowledge that this could happen. Often there's that second thoughts are like, I don't know, and they decide if they're going to do something or not. All the way up to the climax, though, are these incidents that just build towards it. It should always be escalating. Something should always be happening that pushes the action forward. Every scene in your story, every bit of dialogue in crime fiction, it should just be moving. We shouldn't have meandering. There shouldn't be slice of life, debates about who's going to pick up the kids. I mean, just that kind of stuff is boring in crime fiction. We want to get to it, right? Almost like the screenplay in an episode of Criminal Minds or something like. Imagine it like if I were watching this on TV, how quick would I want it to go? Because your reader wants to be thrilled. They don't want to be bored. Yeah, Stephen King is excellent at that. He's personally my favorite author, and most people associate him with horror, but he does like go out into other genres sometimes, like crime fiction. Just to go back to this slide, there's the post-it note method, which I use it for academic writing. It also works great for fiction writing too, where you take your big plot points and you kind of build that plot chart on the wall, right? And then you look like a serial killer, right? And you have them on the wall, and then you have other sticky notes, and you can put them under there, your thoughts and your ideas about, okay, this is where I need to go. Here are the things that could happen along the way. Get it all mapped out so you have a bird's eye view. And then, well, what is fluff? What is slowing the story down? And then you just rip that baby off. You don't need it, right? Or how could I make that worse? How could I escalate it? Let me put that on there, right? I love the sticky note method personally. I'm such a fan of and color coding them and everything.
My whole entire dissertation.
Right, mine was too.
I loved it. I had it all over my floor in the living room.
But it really works, and it gives you this flexibility, and you can kind of see it all in one go. You just have to take over a wall. Yeah, I love color coding. That's my book. She's actually reading my notes from when we go over it.
Oh wow.
I'm a little, as they say, OCD, without being officially. The other advice I would give is create maps. So think of the settings in your story. If you're in the detective's house, for example, quite a bit, create a blueprint of that house and make notes of where things are so that in your writing it's consistent. When you say, I'm running up the hall, I'm running here, I'm doing this, or if there's this really significant ornament on the tree, the reason is the reader tries to keep that straight, and you don't want to betray them, right? You don't want to make them go, oh no, I thought this, I got to go back and look. You never want them to have to go back and look until they finish the book and they're like, wait, were there clues? You want them to reread maybe, but you don't want to slow them down with inconsistencies. It'll also help you keep your story straight, especially if you get fancy with the color coding, because you're going to know, especially if you're writing a whodunit, how they did it, how they escaped and everything, and you can even like have it drawn out on a map. But the detective doesn't know yet, right? But the author has to know without giving it away. And you have to make it where the reader can figure it out along with you without being spoon-fed, because they don't want to be, your reader's so smart, right? You ever read a book and the author thinks I'm an idiot? They're just giving it to me. It's okay if you get all the way to the end and they're like, as long as they could go back through the book and see the clues that were there, right? All right. So maps are fun. Number 4, how you always up the ante. So think of that. We're building towards the climax. Is your hero going to get hurt? Is their loved one going to get kidnapped? Are they going to get in a fist fight if they are Jessica Fletcher? And, I just don't know how she'd do. Are bombs going to start going off because the killer is put out the manifesto and you didn't react fast enough, Have they let the local tabloids know that the medicines are poisoned and the FBI is not doing anything about it? You thought, oh man, I thought we had time to look. Yes, I am quoting the Numbers episode that we watched last night. Where it ups the ante though, because it's like, oh, now we don't have time. People are going to panic. That's a whole new problem. How do we manage the media and this and that? It makes sense for your hero to have to manage those things, right? And it's up to you how much you want to thread that in. You just want to make sure it's not slowing the plot down. So, and it's not too cliche. Think of how many times you've seen the overworked professional and their spouse is fed up with them and their kids won't talk to them. It's kind of refreshing to get to a story where that they actually do balance work life really well, and you love those characters because you want to be those characters. And then something happens to them, they get killed or they get kidnapped, and you're like, oh no, we got to save them because they got this life I want. I was living vicariously. Where if the wife is a bitch, do I really care if she gets kidnapped, Excuse my spelled out language. But I think it's good to have characters that you would want to be and you would want to know, right? People you would like, because otherwise, why should you care? You don't always have to have a dead family to care. That's such a trope. So how are you going to up the ante? How will you avoid, use, or subvert cliches? Because you can use them. It's just be strategic. Just know what they are, right? So here are some very common ones. We've already talked about the defective detective. Your detective does not have to be a perfect person, a savant, but be mindful of what's already there and think editors, they might be really tired of it. How are you going to make it stand out in some way? The savant detective is kind of the opposite side of the coin. Been more popular recently, especially in CBS shows, I'm telling you. If you've seen Criminal Minds, it's Reed. It's Spencer Reed. He's it. If you ever saw the show House MD, it was House. It was the doctor. He's just a genius. Anytime there's that character who they're just so smart in this one special thing. They're able to solve all the problems. Victims no one will miss. Very tried out trope. And remember when you use that trope, you were resending a message about, and I bet I don't even have to say who they are, homeless and prostitutes. Yep. Those are like the two biggies. You are actually reinscribing that message that the homeless are the people who don't like to be homed, or whatever phrase we want to say, or prostitutes or adult workers, that they are victims no one will miss, right? When those are people that people miss, they just might not know where they are, So be careful in how you use these tropes. Are you resending messages that just portray people in ways that aren't necessarily fair, The dying message, the lady stumbles in and falls down and she's like, oh, so-and-so killed me. But they didn't quite get out the last name. It was John. There are like 10 million Johns in New York City. The bad guy gets caught on purpose. How many, especially shows, have you watched where they're like, we can't find the criminal? Guess what? He just actually showed up at the precinct. He turned himself in. And then it changes to the next scene and he's sitting at the interrogation table, smug as a kitten. Just got the milk, right? It's not just Memory Man, though. It's like Law and Order. I mean, you see it all the time. It's kind of lazy writing, And then also mommy issues and also daddy issues. That is a common, if you've ever seen Psycho, the movie Psycho, I'm talking about that, where mommy or daddy did something and that's why I'm the way I am, which could be true. But again, you have to be careful because lots of people have had bad experiences, especially with sexual abuse, and they don't all turn into serial killers. So you don't want to be like, he's a serial killer because, you might weave in actual psychological and behavioral things about why somebody might be that. Like it affected their love that it affected them in certain ways. But you just have to be careful, in my opinion. And it is a really old trope. Like, this is done to death. 6, my favorite. How will you write a compelling villain? So we're going to go through, let me do a time check. The most common types of villains in crime, well, fiction in general, honestly. So that's why I have some that are just, like, obviously Darth Vader, not crime fiction. I hope that you guys are nerds and you get my references. So a dark mirror is, in some way, the villain mirrors the protagonist, right? It could be, in the case of like Luke Skywalker and Darth Vader, this is the person I could become if I'm not careful. I could become just like them, right? I have to watch myself because I am just a few decisions away from being just like them. Or Moriarty and Sherlock, so more classic fiction here. And the idea is they are intellectually matched and they just happen to be two sides of the same coin. It would be very easy to flip them back and forth. If Sherlock Holmes thought being a bad guy was fun, he'd do it. He just he has done the math and been like, hey, I get better outcomes if I'm the good guy. Professor Umbridge and McGonagall and Harry Potter, obsessed with rules, both of them. But what makes them different is Umbridge, it's a means to control, whereas McGonagall, it's a means to keep students safe, right? So that's what makes them different. And then, of course, Gollum and Frodo from Lord of the Rings, right? They're very much, again, this is what I could become. So the mirror villain can be very interesting. Forces of nature, I think, are the easiest way to go. And doesn't make them bad. I just think they're easy because there ain't no arguing with them. There's no psychoanalyzing them. They just want to eat you, or kill you because they are what they are. So the Dark Lord, like any Dark Lord, like Voldemort, Sauron, you're not going to argue with that ancient evil. It's just going to do what it's going to do. Jaws is going to want to eat you. It is going to want to eat you. It, the clown in Stephen King. An F5 tornado, it's just a tornado. It's not personal. But if it's a part of your crime fiction, hey. Or, any Japanese ghosts. So Samara from the Ring. They do not forgive is what I have learned. Can't argue with them. And then there's the shapeshifter. So these are characters that it's kind of hard. Sometimes they're villains, sometimes they're not. It's kind of hard to pin them. So Snape from Harry Potter, Gale Hawthorne from The Hunger Games. Is he a good guy or is he a bad guy? Have a shapeshifter. Yeah, exactly. It's hard to pin him. He does some pretty terrible things, but is he a bad guy? He definitely is villainous at times. These are the hardest to write, in my opinion, the shapeshifter, without just falling straight into cliches. The false ally, very common in fiction. So Boromir from Lord of the Rings, Saruman the White also. Y'all, can you tell I'm an English professor? Characters that you thought were your friend, but they're not. And sometimes it's not their fault. Or in the case here, Boromir has been impacted by the One Ring. He's been corrupted a little bit by it. And then these characters can also have redemption arcs too, where they kind of get free of whatever's messing with their head, or they realize, oh wow, I'm being a jerk. I shouldn't have done that. So the false ally, very common. And then there's the anti-villain, which I think is, again, hard to write, but very rewarding if you can do it right. So here are some very popular ones in fiction. Magneto from X-Men, Uncle Iroh and Prince Zuko from Avatar: The Last Airbender, and then Thanos from Infinity War and Endgame. And what makes them an anti-villain is their motivation is actually coming from a place to good. It makes sense to them. Thanos is afraid the universe will eventually starve itself out. He recognizes he believes there are not enough resources. He saw people on his planet starving, so he's like, well, if I snap and erase half of all life, life will flourish. People won't suffer, right? That's coming from, to him, a place of good. Same thing here if we go to Uncle Iroh, or let's go to Prince Zuko. Zuko's trying to catch the Avatar, who is a child, right? And bring him back to his father. Well, what do you think his father's going to do with the Avatar? They're not going to have a cup of tea. But the reason is he wants his father's love. He says honor, but it's really he wants his father's love. He wants his father's approval. That's coming from a good place, but you're willing to do a really terrible thing, right? And often anti-villains can become heroes.
Interesting with Zuko is father sent him on a fool's quest because that Avatar hadn't been seen in hundreds of years.
Yeah. Yes. So you definitely can pity him too. They make really interesting characters. Or Magneto and X-Men. where you have a case of, all right, all of the non-mutants are trying to kill people like me and are persecuting them. And he has a background where he survived the Holocaust, you know, as a Jewish person. And all that feeds into why he wants to, why he's very anti non-mutants, right? That feeds into it. And that makes him interesting because he's not just, I just hate people, you know? Or to me, that's more interesting than mommy issues. Mommy issues are kind of uncomfortable to read about. Number 7, dialogue. So bad dialogue and long-winded, goes on and on and on and on and on. Doesn't move the plot. So you have characters talking about, well, what did you do this morning? Oh, I ate some cake. What kind of cake was it? It was strawberry. It was the one your grandma made. Oh, I'm sure she'll love that you ate the cake. You know what I'm saying? It just reads like bad fan fiction. It's disposable. You could cut it out. The story wouldn't lose anything. And it's cliche. Things like cats and dogs. You know, it's raining cats and dogs. Any dialogue you don't need. Good dialogue. And I have it up on the board too, because we're going to need it in a second. You're probably tired of hearing me talking. You're like, well, I want to do something. It's concise and specific. It gets to the point. It's layered. So sometimes the reader will be like, I see what you're doing there. There's meanings. There's double entrees going on, right? It refers back to this other thing. Or when he says that, he's also talking about this and he's alluding to that. It makes you feel like, I'm a smart reader when I read it. It's memorable. Not everything they ever say is going to be memorable, but every page, isn't it cool when you have a book where on every page something jumps out at you like, cool. What a cool way to say that. It moves the plot. It's supported by character actions, you know. Dialogue tags are only used as needed. By tags, I mean like he said, she said. And then the best dialogue tag, and you've probably heard this before, is said. It's just said or asked. So you can avoid all those adjectives and adverbs. So here is an example. This is actually something for you to do. And you have index cards or you have your own paper. What I want you to do is take this and make it better following those rules. So I'm going to read it out loud, and our goal is to make the dialogue better. You can cut anything out or add anything in that you want to. Detective Hodges picked up the phone. He dialed Jerome and waited for the 2 whiz kids helping him to pick up. He listened to the rings, and finally, it shouldn't say the Jerome, that's my bad. Finally, Jerome answered. Hodges got straight to the point and said, the killer might have poisoned the victim, but it's more likely she did it to herself. From the other side of the phone line, Jerome asked, booze? Hodges said, probably. Without a post-mortem, there's no way to tell. What do you want Holly and me to do next? Jerome asked. Hodges said, sit tight. Jerome sounded surprised. We still don't call the police? Not yet, Hodges replied. What would you add or take away to make it better? And I actually want to give you time to write. So take this and butcher it, clean it up, do whatever you want to it. And then you're looking at me like, are you going to make us read it out loud? No, I'm not going to do that. So you got to take it and see if you can fix it. Because I'm already telling you, this is not good. This is not good writing. Victoria, you too.
Question, are they actually looking at the body currently?
No, he picked up the phone. They're talking.
No, but was like looking at it while he was talking to the whiz people?
I don't know if it matters, but you can put that in there if you want to. In the actual scene, they're just having a phone conversation. They're just exchanging information. You could be looking at them though. Laurel. Do you want to be a crime fiction writer?
Writer. Writing is so much fun. Where am I a nerd? Because I had no idea what you were talking about. I'm such a nerd. I only knew just because they were like old. It's really cold. Like,
Where this means no fluff. Or we could say flowers. We're not trying to be J.R.R. Tolkien with our prose, right? We're not trying to be poetic.
One right here for you. Thank you for being my chair.
So welcome. Thank you.
That's left over from public speaking.
Hey, am I supposed to?
We were here when I got here this
It's coming clean.
morning. I think it's something from a class, like advertising or something.
I want to make sure I wasn't supposed to like clean it.
Advertising prompts. Wish I had some dramatic detective fiction music for you right now. That was dungeon music.
So much I know. Another one, or are you leaving after this?
After this, I gotta go. I'm gonna go chair. Go chair one, and then I'll. Out of the library.
Yeah.
30 more seconds, and it's okay if you don't finish. If I'd been smarter, I would have given you a printed part, and you could have just crossed out the things you wanted to cut, and like added notes. I'm not very smart. I'm pretty dumb.
I don't think so. 205. Zine, Z-I-N-E.
Little magazine. No, those are super rude. Never ask people who they are. I know this is Laura. I know this is Victoria. What's your name?
Donna.
You're Donna. What's your name?
I'm Brooklyn.
Brooklyn. Brooklyn, what's something you changed?
I changed how she died. I know he said boo. Well, you know, he thought she died from booze.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, she took a bottle of pills. She slit her wrist. She
Oh.
was dead in the bathtub. Yeah.
So you're like, make it more interesting. Like, how'd she die? Right?
Yeah.
Okay. Donna, what's something you changed?
That's way shorter. I got a whole bunch of that dialogue out,
All this up here?
like everything pretty much I changed. It's probably easier just to read it.
Okay.
Detective Hodges dialed his 2 Wits kids. When Jerome picked up, Hodges jumped in. She poisoned herself. There's no killer. Booze, Jerome asked. Can't tell without a post-mortem. Holly and I will call the cops. No, not yet.
Very nice. Made it much more concise, right?
Yeah.
Victoria, do you want to share anything you wrote? Is there something that you changed?
Yes.
What did you change? Is there a particular line that you're proud of?
What I've gotten so far, looking over his notes, Detective Hodges dialed Jerome. The killer might have poisoned the victim, but it's more likely the victim did it herself. OD, Jerome asked on the other end.
Okay. So like, oh, these are asked on the other end. Okay. This is the actual passage from Mr. Mercedes by Stephen King. This is what it looks like on the page, except there aren't those spaces there. I put in Hodges because the reader would know who he is because it's at the end of a paragraph. Hodges picks up the phone and says, also he writes this in present tense, so that's why I changed it for you because I know that bugs people. Hodges picks up the phone and says, he might have poisoned her, but it's more likely she did it to herself. Booze? Probably. Without a post-mortem, there's no way to tell. There's not a way to tell. What do you want us to do? Sit tight? We still don't call the police? Not yet. You see how much fluff is missing? Because we know you would know as the reader he's talking to Jerome, and we don't have to say it. You also, as the reader, would already know who we is. I put that in there for you. It's him and Holly, because you've been reading along. But some authors will still redundantly state who he would have been talking to, right? As a reader, you would know. On a page, this takes up about this much space. And readers love it. They hate to see like chunks of text, especially like descriptive text. Because don't you just skip that and go straight to the dialogue? Yeah. This goes back and forth so quick. And look at her. That's older fiction, and it's doing that old school chunks of text thing, right? And you're like, where's some dialogue? A lot of interior and internal monologue in that book. But yeah, again, I just wanted to show you this because it's a great example of there aren't even any tags. And yet you can follow the conversation. It's very quick and to the point. And this is about 200 pages into the book. probably. So by now, each character has a voice. And that's another thing about dialogue is your character should have a voice. You should be able to take away the name tags and basically know who's talking. You know, who is talking. And who would say that, you know? So here's my contact information. We're not actually done yet. I'm just putting it up there. I do have one more thing for you. I'm going to steal the rose. So I was actually going to ask you to share your crime fiction ideas. Victoria, come over here to the stable time. Right? Do you have any ideas for crime fiction since we got, and you'll keep me straight, right? We got 5 minutes left. You'll yell at me. Do you have any ideas for things you want to write? What are you thinking about? Like, what's your plot?
I've actually started one where a group of neighborhood people who've grown up together, one of them, well, somebody has been murdered. And you find out later that the killer is somebody that they knew, but they don't know that. At the beginning, everybody's looking outward to find killed her. So, and the whole kind of what made me interested in this is the idea of what happens to a group of people to whom murder intrudes, but also what happens when they find out it is one of them who's murdered somebody. Because to me, that's just sort of there's not a lot about what happens when murder.
Or is there going to be a dilemma? Like, do we turn?
Yes.
Like, I know
There's a
it's
brother
kind of
involved
thing.
and an ex-girlfriend involved. So
Then your characters actually can become villains in a way, right?
they do. So
And then literally, it's I know what you did with summer. That's your second book.
very
That sitcom Pretty Little Liars, is another one kind of like.
yeah.
Sitcom.
That was good. I liked it. I was surprised at how good it was.
Yeah.
It kept me there.
I've actually never seen it, but I knew the girl because I had friends that watched it.
Okay.
With the girls.
So you'll have clues leading up to that big reveal, and then the climax that actually might even be, what do we do with this knowledge? Right.
And
And
there's kind of two climaxes really within that, I think. I'm not there yet, but
yeah.
I know where it's going. I just don't know whether one of them is going to be a climax on day one, or is it going to be two kind of
That could be
climaxes
on your, just to go to the plot chart again, right?
Yeah.
Is sometimes on the way to the
Yes.
climax, there's the twist.
Right,
You know?
exactly.
And that kind of sounds like a twist.
That's exactly.
But it would really kick things into gear towards this, right? Because otherwise the reader's like, well, I thought this book was done.
Yeah.
There's no reason. Are you thinking about anything?
I am thinking about it. Someone is like a group of high school kids. They think they've joined a good organization, but it's actually a bad one. And so they end up doing a series of crimes for this organization. And then it's like I kind of already know, like, I want the leader of the organization to kill some kids.
Uh-huh.
And, like, he tells the high school kids, you need to cover this up. You know,
Is there a reason why?
I'm not there yet.
Is he like a charismatic cult leader?
Yeah, the cult.
Yeah, it can sound a little culty, or sometimes it's Buddhist. You know, like that young and paid thing, or you know. Yeah. So that's interesting. Though. I like how both of you. It's interesting because you're like a group, like groups of people, right? Victoria, if you were going to write crime fiction, what do you think you're going to do?
Currently I would do, not writing it, I'm creating like a whodunit game for her final project for the class. And with like backstories for characters and stuff.
You're going to launch a mystery, right?
Whodunit.
So you got to figure out who did it before we all die. Something like, oh yeah,
I feel like a simplified like Clue version where it's just like one round.
yeah. You do have to have a reason characters don't just leave. Let the police handle it, right? That's why oftentimes you see those kinds of stories. They're on an island, right?
Yeah.
They're on a crashed airplane. I mean, there's some reason why we're dependent on each other. Yeah, we're dependent on each other, even though we would just leave if we could. You know, not my business, kind of a thing. But yeah, how much time do we have left? 10 minutes, awesome. That means we have 10 minutes to do some more writing. So I was gonna challenge you, to come up with, and you can do it as a group, you can do it individually. This was, when I was a middle school teacher, this was an exercise called a rose in her teeth. And so I told them, I was like, okay, your prompt is, there was a rose in her teeth, right? And you're the detective. Come up with a story idea based on that. Like he found her with a rose in her teeth.
Doesn't matter what color the rose was.
Not unless it matters to you, if you want it to be.
I didn't think it to be a certain color.
I just happen to have a leftover red rose for this morning. You know,
Because roses have meaning, different colors.
yeah, and so the challenge is to think like, well, what kind of story could I just build over that kind of prompt? You know, there was a rose in her teeth. And sometimes when you're stuck with writer's block, it's kind of cool to come up with those kinds of phrases, you know, just sort of phrases that'll trigger your imagination. Because instantly you might be imagining, is he looking at a picture of her with a rose in her teeth and she's still alive and she's been kidnapped? You know, she did. You know, and it's things to think about. So I was going to give you some time just to create inspiration. Again, you can plan together or you can plan alone. Yeah, I'm a professor, so it's interesting. It's what people do. I am going to find some spooky music now.
Okay.
You got 10 minutes to go.
If you want to use Ben's, I have the flash drive.
Do you?
I do, actually.
What did you say? What did I call you? What's your name? I've known you, Laura, all day. Haven't I? I'm so sorry.
Like, you know me, you just.
I know a Laura with dark hair and everything. Yeah, I'm sorry. I have no excuse. It's on record too. It's being recorded.
Hi.
I'm so sorry. I'll meet Dr. Dunmore for the rest of the day.
She knows me.
Or El Moron.
A moron. Wow. So this is a student's spooky music. I don't know if it'll be right, but he's selling it over in the vintage room. See if I can find a place. Set the mood. Give me a virus. He's gonna hack out.
7 minutes. Well, 7 minutes until we're done.
Yeah. We got 5 minutes to write, and then we'll have 2 minutes to share. I throw some ideas out. I'm so sorry I've been calling you good.
I was like, she done gave me a new name.
I don't know where I'm getting at. I'm confusing you with Laura Brink. And I don't know why. I decided y'all were the same person.
Get to go be a hyphen for a librarian next. That's gonna be interesting.
I can't get his to go on my own.
She's a librarian.
Lower YouTube. The savior of every teacher.
Halloween music.
Let's do. Oh, I'm so bad. Hold on. Here we go.
Where your shipping address types itself.
We don't have to premium. Elevator. Inspirational theme song.
lost my ambassador name. Ambassador Monica. Thank you. Quiz. My name is Nicole.
You guys are each other now.
It'll be stuck in your head.
Yes. Throughout the day, and then and you have 2 minutes left.
Randomly, I was her for Halloween one year.
I can see that.
I just had makeup on at Hills.
Let's share what we got. And I know it's super incomplete. I mean, you guys had 5 minutes. But sometimes it's good to give your brain these little challenges. And you never know, it might spawn an actual short story or a novel or something, right? Do you want to share?
I do want to
You like you want to share. You have that look, that glow.
All right. Her body was displayed on the rooftop with a rose in her teeth. Her eyes were staring blankly at the night sky as the snow fell. Attorney Angela Alexander was the first to arrive at the scene. She had been following the rooftop murder cases for the past 3 months. That's all I got.
There you go, right? And you're starting in the middle of the action too, right? Or right at something's happened, but we're starting in action. She was on the subway reading the morning paper. You know what I mean? She got a call, skipped the fluff and got straight to it. I like it. And in your scene, we would start to learn things about the attorney, right? And we would start to decide, do we like her? Do we trust her? Is she competent? You know, we'd start to learn things. Victoria.
Looking at her cell phone, a red almost black rose in her teeth. Her body stiff and post-mortem. Who was she? What is her story? Why did this happen? Examining her body, she placed with care. She looks almost as if she's sleeping, hands folded in her lap, eyes closed. She looks like a porcelain doll. Whoever did this with care.
Wow, and I'm thinking that it sounds like detective thing because it's very short and clipped and like they're analyzing. Victoria happened to know is a criminal justice major, so very nice. I like that it's a feminist black rose, right? Donna. Yeah, now I'm afraid to say names.
Got it.
There was a red rose in her teeth. She lay across her red velvet sofa, no sign of trauma obvious, but obviously dead, her skin tinged blue. She was dressed for every day in a pair of worn jeans and stained t-shirt, but her hair found a band around her head. Her right arm was raised above, her left arm folded across her belly, and her legs gracefully crossed, looking like the dancer she had been in her youth. Her phone played music Nick vaguely recognized.
Oh, nice. There's so much exposition you're giving us without being like, the victim was a dancer, you know? Very nice. And you're also giving the reader clues that might turn out to be a red herring or they might be really useful. So all of those are really good starts. I wish that you could follow up with me and be like, Brooklyn, tell me, what did it turn into? Did it turn into anything? You know? That would be really cool. So yeah, definitely do that. We are done though. We're out of time.
Please make sure that you scan this QR code.
Here's my contact if you need it.
I'll be van away for y'all.
Okay.
Please scan this QR code. Get some feedback. Let her know she did horrible or she did great. And then kept calling Laura.
Laura, what was it?
And then after this, you are free to go
You're free.
All right. To another section. I don't know where y'all are going, but you can go anywhere.
Like there's some. more
Yes,
here.
I actually, I gotta get to the library. I gotta do a session. All right, let me shut this stuff down.
6:30, so about 35.
We're gonna end this.